I was on my mission, kind of became friends with a member. He had us over for dinner every week. We talked about all sorts of gospel topics, but one of the ones that came up more frequently was the second coming. He taught me some things about it that really kind of got my mind spinning and kind of lit a fire in me. I decided it was something that I wanted to take seriously and learn as much as I could about. Went to work, read as much as I could, and studied as much as I could. You know, the Lord says if we're prepared, we shall not fear. Yes, there's going to be a rough patch. If you're feeling discouraged or anything, just push through because there's a turning point. We have a bright future. It's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot to look forward to.
Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
So good. We're so glad to have you here. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into the interview. Why don't you give us a quick summary of your book?
Yeah, my book is called Before the Second Coming, and it's kind of broken out into two different parts. Part one is about the signs of the times, and part two is more about the symbolism of the second coming, and specifically like types and shadows. Mm-hmm. So like the best way to describe it, so if you're familiar with what a type of Christ is, so for example, the story of Abraham and Isaac is a type of Christ. Like Abraham represents the father and
symbolic.
Isaac represents the son, the sacrifice represents Christ's atonement, so forth.
Perfect.
So that's a type of Christ, and most of the types of Christ are types of Christ's first coming. They foreshadow his ministry or atonement in some way. Part two of my book kind of compiles the types of Christ's second coming. So it deals a lot with symbolism, and between part one and part two, there should be something in there for everyone.
For everyone, awesome. What was the inspiration behind this book?
Yeah, so about 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more now, I was on my mission and kind of became friends with a member. He had us over for dinner every week for a couple months, and we talked about all sorts of gospel topics, but one of the ones that came up more frequently was the second coming. And he had been interested in that and studied it for most of his life, and he taught me some things about it that really kind of got my mind spinning and kind of lit a fire in me. And so when I returned home from my mission, I decided it was something that I wanted to take seriously and learn as much as I could about. And so went to work, read as much as I could, and studied as much as I could. And after a decade or so, I kind of looked back and saw that, man, I've kind of amassed quite a bit of research on the subject. And so the next part was just kind of organizing it and sharing it with the world. So that's where we are. Fantastic.
What makes your book unique?
Yeah, so most LDS books on the second coming, at least the ones that I've read, kind of focus more in generalities, and I would say kind of the inspiration for it is to help the saints kind of prepare for the second coming spiritually. Mm-hmm. And while I think that is extremely important and there's a ton of value to be had in those types of books, I tried to take a little bit different approach in that I wanted to place the signs of the times in their most likely chronological order. I wanted it to read like more as a storyline.
Yeah.
Where, this sign happens first and here's why. And this sign happens after that and here's why. And so that's one. And then, the second thing that makes my book unique is I wanted to kind of avoid generalities as much as possible. So for an example, we all know that one of the signs of the times is we always hear about wars and rumors of wars. Mm-hmm. And that's great, but if you think about it, there's been wars and rumors of wars going on since the beginning of time in most nations, right? So does that really help us? And so I kind of wanted to avoid some of the generalities and really speak specifics and provide as much detail and information as possible on the things that we do know, and do so in their chronological order to the best of our ability. So that's kind of the two things that makes my book unique.
Do you have an inside story that you can share with us about this book?
Yeah, so like I said, the goal of writing the book was to place the signs of the times in their correct chronological order. So the fun part of writing and researching was trying to figure that out. And so kind of the most rewarding parts of that study were when I would find an event that had to happen either before or after another event. And I would call those like anchors or hooks, where we know that this has to happen before this. And so for an example, an example that your audience might be familiar with is Nephi's vision.
Right.
So he's going along and he says, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And then, he stops and says, John's going to tell you the rest. And so we have to jump over to John's record and figure out, okay, where did, Nephi kind of leave off, and where does John's information on the second coming, kind of pick up? Mm-hmm. And I think we've been able to kind of, at least I have my opinions on where that transition took place in John's record. And if you're interested in, the verse where that transition happened, it's detailed in my book. But that's an example of like a hook where we know that the events that Nephi talks about have to happen before the events that John talks about. So other examples, like Joseph Smith, I came across a quote from him that said there's going to be destructions one after another until the Ancient of Days comes, which is meaning Adam. He's talking about the Council of Adam on Diamond. So knowing that there's going to be a series of destructions that occur before Adam on Diamond, and then they're going to be stopped. And there's another quote. He said, the purpose of these destructions is to prepare the way for the return of the lost 10 tribes when they return. So that tells us that the lost 10 tribes, return after a series of destructions. And then, for example, section 133 of the Doctrine and Covenants says the 10 tribes are going to return to Zion. So that tells us that Zion needs to be built before the 10 tribes return.
Right.
And, the 144,000 will likely be called and set apart after the 10 tribes return, because there's 12,000 from each tribe that need to be called and set apart. And then to take it one step further, if you get into the book of Revelation, John says that the 144,000 need to be called and set apart before a series of plagues occur, one of which is the Battle of Armageddon. And so we know the Battle of Armageddon happens after the 144,000, which happened after the tribes return, which happens after Zion's built, and Adam on Diamond in a period of destruction. So it's kind of almost like links in a chain that once you kind of figure out some of them and kind of build a picture, or like you mentioned earlier, pieces of a puzzle, it kind of all comes together into one like logical storyline. And that's kind of what I tried to present in the book.
Okay, so now you got me thinking. You said it took you, you had been studying the Second Coming for 20 years. How long did it take you to put all of these links together?
I had the basic outline pretty much a decade into the study. So it was a slow process, but I think
a lot of information though.
Yeah, and I think I've presented enough arguments to kind of make the case for this happens first and this to kind of build it out. But
okay. And what do you hope readers will take away from this book?
So two things. Number one, I don't want us to be like ignorant on what's going to happen. Like, we don't have to be in the dark. There's been so much that has been revealed on some of the things that are going to happen in our day that we just don't have to be ignorant of that. So if you're not sure and uncertain about what's going to happen, this book can be a real help with that. And I also would advise that we shouldn't let our fear become stronger than our faith. The Lord says, if we're prepared, we shall not fear. And so, yes, there's going to be a rough patch with some of these things that I talk about. But I mentioned this in my preface that, some of the rough things that are going to happen are kind of the early chapters. And if you're feeling discouraged or anything, just push through, because there's a turning point in the book, and after that, it's should bring nothing but peace and joy to faithful Latter-day Saints. So we have a bright future. It's not all doom and gloom. There's a lot to look forward to.
It reminds me of the quote, if it's not okay, then it's not over. I'm missing some of it, but
sure.
Basically, everything's going to be okay in the end. So if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Yeah.
Right?
So if we have the end and we understand what's going to happen ahead of time, it's going to give us that more of an advantage.
Right. Okay. So do you have a reaction from a reader that made an impact on you, or?
Yeah, about a year ago, I was able to meet another LDS author, someone that I look up to. His name's George Potter. In fact, he's a Cedar Fort author.
Yeah.
And he's contributed a ton to Book of Mormon research. He's credited for finding the most probable location for the River Laman and Valley Lemuel in Saudi Arabia, and just kind of contributed a ton to the Book of Mormon research. And I was able to meet him. I read most of his books. I met him about a year ago, and super nice. I sent him a copy of my manuscript, and he read it and sent me an email that was had a great review and told me how much he loved it and why. And so that kind of meant a lot to me, like just because he's someone I looked up to as another LDS author, and I followed his work for years and years. So
yeah, he's fantastic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so in
Not
fact,
that we're biased.
Yeah, but I mean, I used some of the testimonial that he gave me in that email in the back cover. So. Yeah, so it's always, yeah, go ahead.
I want to find and read it.
Please.
There it is. Okay, Before the Second Coming was an easy read because of the author's ability to organize the topic into a logical storyline. I learned a great deal by reading it and have changed some of my perceptions about the future as a result. That's so nice. I love that.
Yeah, so it's always good to get good feedback like that, regardless of who it comes from. But
yeah, but it definitely feels good when it's someone you admire too.
Absolutely.
And where can we follow you or find your work?
Yeah, so I have two websites. One is beforethesecondcoming.com, and that's where you can purchase a copy of the book. And I also offer a free downloadable chapter on that website. It's on the Battle of Armageddon, which is a really fun topic. So if you want to kind of test drive the car before you buy it, you can go to that website, beforethesecondcoming.com, and get the free chapter and purchase a book from there. I also have an LDS blog where I post some of my research on the topics that I'm interested in, non-Second Coming related. That's ldstheology.com. So either place you can find me. So
okay, perfect. We're so glad that you came in today. Thanks for the interview.